June 6, 1944. Before dawn, the English Channel is cold and still. 156,000 Allied soldiers wait at the water's edge, the largest amphibious invasion ever attempted. The planners have spent months accounting for every variable, running every contingency, mapping every threat. Among the threats they mapped most carefully, the Luftwaffe. By June 1944, the German Air Force has been fighting for nearly 5 years. It swept Poland in days. It declared air supremacy over France 11 days into that campaign. It opened Barbarossa by destroying the Red Air Force on the ground before Soviet pilots could reach their cockpits. Allied commanders know what this force is capable of. They have war-gamed the response. They have allocated fighter cover for the beaches. Every sortie is accounted for. The Luftwaffe flies 70 sorties that day, across all of France. 70. Not 70 kills, not 70 engagements, 70 individual aircraft taking off against the largest amphibious invasion in history. 2 German pilots, Oberst Joseph Priller and his wingman, strafe the beaches. 2 men, the rest cannot get there. The question is not how America won. The question is how an air force that spent 4 years ruling the sky ended up at 70. 4 years earlier, September 1939. The Luftwaffe is not the most dangerous weapon system in the world because of its planes. It is the most dangerous because of its doctrine. The Germans have built an air force around a single idea: total offensive shock. Strike fast, strike first, paralyze the enemy at the moment of maximum vulnerability. Luftwaffe Regulation 16, issued in 1935, codified the cult of the offensive. By 1939, no air force on Earth is more committed to this idea, and none has had more opportunity to test it. Poland. The formula works exactly as designed. German Stukas and Bf-109s sweep the Polish Air Force from the sky in days, then turn to close support of the advancing panzers. Destroy the enemy's ability to react, and he cannot stop what follows. France. May 1940. Surprise attacks across a network of forward airfields destroy hundreds of aircraft before they can be scrambled. The Luftwaffe declares air superiority on the 5th day of the campaign, air supremacy 6 days after that. With the sky cleared, the German Air Force can dedicate nearly everything to army support. The Wehrmacht moves through the Ardennes at a pace that the French High Command, built for a different war, has no procedure to answer: the Soviet Union. June 1941. The Red Air Force is caught on its forward fields. Thousands of aircraft destroyed before Soviet pilots can reach them. What follows destroys not just planes, but the men to fly them, the mechanics to service them, the organized infrastructure that makes an air force function. Germany holds advantages in tactical doctrine, combat experience, and accumulated operational knowledge that the Soviets will spend 2 years clawing back. But inside this machine of conquest, the seeds of ruin have already been planted. Not by any enemy, by the certainty, held at the highest levels of German leadership, that this war will be short. The Luftwaffe's training system has been told the war will not last. No need for deep pipelines. No need to plan for replacing irreplaceable men. The Home Defense Force is considered second-rate. Offensive aviation wins battles, and Germany's battles will always be fought abroad. Even production thinking is shaped by this assumption. In 1942, General Hans Jeschonek, chief of the Luftwaffe General Staff, states that he would not know what to do with more than 300 fighters per month. 300. For an air force fighting from Norway to North Africa, to the plains of Russia. On August 17, 1943, Jeschonek learns what 300 does not prepare you for. That morning, 376 American bombers fly deep into Germany in 2 columns, one toward the ball-bearing factories at Schweinfurt, one toward the Messerschmitt complex at Regensburg. When they are finished, 60 B-17 are gone. The scale and range of the operation shocks German Air Command. That night, the scale of it, the arithmetic of what is approaching. Jesenik takes his own life. The man who said Germany needed no more than 300 fighters a month died, knowing the Americans were coming in thousands. The Americans had a plan before Pearl Harbor. In the summer of 1941, 4 men, Lieutenant Colonel Harold George, Major Haywood Hansel, Major Lawrence Cooter, and Lieutenant Colonel Kenneth Walker, sat down with their Air Corps Tactical School training and wrote AWPD-1, the blueprint for American air power, drafted while their country was still at peace. It called for 250 combat groups, more than 105,000 aircraft, more than 2 million airmen. The core belief was this: formations of heavily armed bombers, flying tight defensive boxes in daylight, could fight their way to any target in Germany without fighter escort. They could bomb with precision. They could find the critical nodes in an industrial system, ball-bearing plants, oil refineries, aircraft factories, and cut them out surgically. Hit the right targets, and Germany's war machine would stop. The 8th Air Force activates in Savannah, Georgia, on January the 28th, 1942. Its mission: destroy the Luftwaffe, then destroy Germany's ability to wage war. The Casablanca Conference of January 1943 formalizes the arrangement with the British, Americans by day, RAF by night. The point-blank directive in June gives it precision: destroy German fighter production above all else, because Operation Overlord cannot happen while the Luftwaffe controls European skies. The theory is sound. The execution will cost more than anyone is prepared to say. August 17, 1943. Mission number 84. 376 bombers, 16 bomb groups, flying beyond the range of their fighter escorts toward Schweinfurt and Regensburg. At Schweinfurt, the machinery is dragged from the rubble and put back into operation. Ball-bearing production halts for 6 weeks. 60 B-17 are gone. 600 men are dead or captured. The lesson is not learned in time. October 14, 1943. Black Thursday. More than 3,000 American airmen climb into their B-17 flying fortresses in the cold, damp pre-dawn hours. Most are 21, 22 years old. Some are younger. They know the target is Schweinfurt again. The same factories, the same deep Germany that swallowed 60 aircraft 10 weeks ago. The P-47 Thunderbolt escort fighters will turn back at the German border. After that, there is nothing between the B-17S and the Jagdwaffe except the guns in their own turrets. The Germans track them on radar from the moment they take to the air. Of the 291 fortresses dispatched, 60 are shot down. 17 more are damaged beyond repair and scrapped. Another 121 sustain varying damage. 650 men are killed or captured. The surviving aircraft limp back to East Anglia, carrying dead men, hydraulics gone, control surfaces shot away, bomb bay doors that won't close. The official American history will later acknowledge it plainly. The 8th Air Force had, for the time being, lost air superiority over Germany. Lieutenant General Ira Eaker, commanding the 8th, tells the press, "We now have our teeth in the Hun Air Force's neck." He knows this is not true. His command's morale is fracturing. The deep penetration raids are suspended. Eaker has built this force from almost nothing, has fought for it politically at every turn, has watched it bleed through a year of operations. He says the opposite of what he knows, because the alternative is worse. A 25-mission tour, at the loss rates of autumn 1943, offers a bomber crew somewhere between a 25 and a 43% chance of survival. In January 1944, Eaker is reassigned to the Mediterranean. He does not get to see what he built make it to the other side. Between October 1943 and that handover, the 8th Air Force does not stop. It transforms. The man who arrives to command it on January 6, 1944, is Major General James H. Doolittle, 47 years old, compact and energetic, a doctorate in aeronautical engineering from MIT, a Medal of Honor from the raid on Tokyo. His men know who he is before he steps off the plane. What he inherits is, by any measure, extraordinary. Where Eaker had 461 operational bombers and 274 fighters, Doolittle has 1,655 bombers and 882 fighters. The American industrial engine has been running at full capacity for 2 years. It is just now delivering at the scale the Doctrine always required. Among those fighters, the North American P-51 Mustang. Sleek, deceptively graceful, powered by a Rolls-Royce Merlin engine built under license by Packard. Its laminar flow wing makes it aerodynamically cleaner than almost anything in the sky. With the newly introduced metal drop tanks, the Mustang can fly to Berlin and back. Brigadier General Thomas Hayes, who will fly them in combat, puts it simply. The Merlin-powered P-51 has the 3 qualities you need most if you are going to escort bombers to Berlin: range, range, and range. The Germans have built their entire defensive posture around a single assumption. American fighters cannot follow the bombers deep into Germany. As of January 1944, that assumption is no longer true. The Luftwaffe does not yet know it. Doolittle knows it. Within days of taking command, he acts. The old Doctrine chains the escort fighters to the bomber formations like guard dogs. Hold position, do not pursue. Doolittle unchains them. Fighters now sweep 50 miles ahead of the bomber stream, hunting German interceptors on the ground and in their forming up zones before they can reach the bombers. By the end of January, entire fighter groups are ranging free. Above Doolittle sits General Carl Spaatz, and above Spaatz is General Henry Arnold's standing order. Destroy the enemy air force wherever you find them, in the air, on the ground, and in the factories. Operation Argument is the mechanism built to execute that order. Its targets are the aircraft factories of central and southern Germany. Its logic is plainly stated in the planning documents. The primary purpose of the bombing missions is to force the Luftwaffe to rise and fight the P-51s. The bombers are not just weapons. They are bait. The commanders flying those missions know it. Planners estimate losses of 200 aircraft on the first day alone. This is not easy confidence. It is the hard kind, held by men who have done the arithmetic. East Anglia, February 20th, 1944. Before dawn, dark clouds hang over the flatlands of eastern England, the same clouds that have pressed down for weeks. Ground crews in heavy coveralls move under harsh electric lights. Loading, pre-flighting, checking. Temperature near freezing. Visibility close to nothing. Forecasters tentatively promise clear skies over Leipzig and Gotha by morning. It is enough for General Spaatz. "Let 'em go," he orders. In the murk over East Anglia, 1,000 bombers form up by instruments. Staggered combat boxes of 18 aircraft each, assembling blind in cloud, by timing and radio silence and the precarious luck of not colliding with 999 other aircraft doing the same thing. Each B-17 weighs over 30 tons at takeoff with a full bomb load. 1,600 engines turn over simultaneously. The sound reverberates across 50 miles of flatland. Day 1. More than 1,000 bombers and 660 escort fighters reach 12 industrial targets across Germany. 21 American aircraft are lost, a fraction of the predicted 200. For the first time, American fighters have followed the bombers all the way to the target. The defensive geometry Germany has relied on for 18 months no longer exists. That night, 823 RAF bombers hit Leipzig. Days 2 and 3 bring heavier fighting. Weather forces portions of the force to fly unescorted on the 22nd, and 16% of the attacking bombers are lost. That day also brings Nijmegen, a Dutch city, not a target. American bombs fall there anyway. Over 200 Dutch civilians are killed. In the accounting of Big Week that follows, this goes largely unacknowledged. It belongs in the record, the cost paid by people who had no voice in the plan. Day 4, February 23rd. Bad weather closes over Germany. The missions are postponed. In Nissen huts on the East Anglian plain, the crews wait. Powdered eggs in communal mess halls. Letters home, careful letters. Letters that say very little. The strategy is not a secret. The bombers are bait, and the men inside them know it. They will fly the next mission when it comes. Day 5. Schweinfurt again. The same ball-bearing factories that cost 60 aircraft in August, 60 more in October. This time, the P-51s go the full distance. The mission costs. It does not cost the way it once did. Day 6. February 25th. The final day. The deepest strikes. 754 heavy bombers fly toward Regensburg, Augsburg, Stuttgart, Fürth. Regensburg, the Messerschmitt complex that was the target on August 17, 1943. The day 60 bombers were lost, and the mission was called a costly success. 6 months later, the bombers come back. This time, the Mustangs come the full distance. At the Prüfening complex outside the city, the 449th Bomb Group puts 37.5 tons of 500-pound bombs into the target. The mission log notes a column of very black smoke rising 4,000 to 5,000 feet. When the bombers rally off the target, the Luftwaffe attacks. The enemy fighters are, in the words of the unit record, extremely aggressive, coming in pairs, 3s, 4s, and 5s, pressing home their attacks with great vigor from the target to the mountains at the Austrian border. They come anyway. That night, nearly 600 RAF aircraft destroy 60% of Augsburg. On the ground at his headquarters, General Major Josef Schmid, commanding the 1st Fighter Corps, the man who has watched each day of this week accumulate, who has watched the exchange rate turn against him with no answer, writes his assessment. By February 25th, he has reached his conclusion. In the long run, Schmid writes, our forces are fighting a hopeless battle. Now the accounting. Across the 6 days of Operation Argument, the Americans and their allies flew 3,800 bomber sorties. They lost 226 bombers and 28 escort fighters. The Germans lost 290 fighters destroyed and another 90 damaged. The twin-engined Zerstörer heavy fighter units, the bomber killers that had been mauling B-17 for 2 years, are gutted. 17 to 18% of the Luftwaffe's experienced fighter pilots are dead or out of the war. The mission was clear. Destroy the factories that build German fighters. Break the Luftwaffe by cutting off its supply of planes. Here is what actually happened. The factories were rebuilt. Machine tools survive explosions that destroy buildings. Equipment is moved to dispersed facilities within weeks. Production is reorganized. German aircraft production in 1944 does not fall. It rises. Germany builds just over 40,000 aircraft that year, the highest figure in the history of the Third Reich. At the moment, Big Week was supposed to have crippled German air power. German industry is producing more planes than at any point in the war. The Americans thought they were fighting an industrial war. They were fighting a human one. You can rebuild a factory in 6 weeks. Germany proved this repeatedly against the best efforts of the 8th Air Force through 1943 and into 1944. You cannot put 200 hours of combat experience back into a man who is gone. By early 1944, the German fighter force was gaining an average net of 26 new pilots every month. 26. Against an attrition rate that Big Week alone pushed to nearly 18% of the experienced pilot corps in 6 days. The Luftwaffe was not being starved of aircraft. It was being starved of the men who knew how to fly them in combat. Men who had survived long enough to understand the geometry of an attack run, the specific vulnerabilities of the formations they were fighting, the difference between aggression and waste in an engagement where one mistake ends everything. Those men could not be stockpiled like ball bearings. Germany tried to solve the problem by accelerating its training pipeline, sending new pilots into combat with 50 hours of flying time. American pilots entering combat by 1944 had 300 or more. The Germans were not sending pilots against the 8th Air Force. They were sending inexperience against it. Berlin, March 4, 1944. 730 bombers fly toward the German capital with 800 fighters as escort. The Luftwaffe rises to meet them. 69 B-17 are lost. Significant. Brutal, real. But the Luftwaffe loses 160 aircraft. The exchange rate has moved to the wrong side of the ledger for Germany. It will not move back. The pattern holds through March, through April, into May. Each engagement costs the Luftwaffe pilots it cannot replace against a force that is growing with every passing month. The training schools themselves are shutting down. Germany is short of aviation fuel. No fuel means no training. No training means the men who replace the dead are less capable than the men who died. The spiral tightens in only one direction. June 6, 1944. Allied commanders had planned for the Luftwaffe's response over the beaches. The Luftwaffe in France managed 70 sorties, then 175 that night with no effect. 2 German pilots strafed the beaches. The remainder could not get there, not because the planes did not exist, but because the pilots who could fly them effectively were gone. The fuel to move the rest was not there, and the organized operational capacity to contest the skies over Normandy had simply ceased to function. From 2,200 fighters scrambling to meet every major Allied raid in the summer of 1943 to 70 sorties on June 6th. The human cost of what produced that number does not resolve into a clean reckoning. The 8th Air Force alone suffered more than 70,000 casualties across the European campaign. More than 11,000 heavy bombers of the RAF and USAAF were lost in the European theater between 1942 and 1945. The 22-year-old from Ohio climbing into a 30-ton machine before dawn, knowing he was the bait, writing the letter home. That is the weight on which the strategy rested. Sir Arthur Harris fought against participating in Operation Argument with the same conviction he brought to everything. He believed city bombing would break German morale. He regarded precision targeting of factories as strategically short-sighted. He was overruled by direct order from Air Chief Marshal Portal. His night bombers flew. His bombers contributed mission after mission through Big Week and beyond to the degradation of the force Harris had argued should not be prioritized. The morale bombing theory he staked his career on never proved out. The intervention that broke German air power was the one he had opposed. Germany surrendered in May 1945 with approximately 3,000 frontline combat aircraft remaining. The planes were there. There was no fuel to fly them. There were no pilots qualified to fly them effectively in combat. The most formidable air force in the world in September 1939 ended the war with a warehouse full of machines it could not use. Doolittle's post-war accounting was precise. The rate of attrition of the Luftwaffe's pilots exceeded Germany's rate of replacement. Also, the several months of reduced aircraft production during a crucial period created a shortage of reserve aircraft that was difficult to overcome. He named the pilots first. The factories came second. You can rebuild a factory. You can retool a production line. You can draw on stockpiled inventory while you clear the rubble. What no industrial system has ever accomplished is restoring to a man the 200 hours of combat experience that dies with him. That irreplaceable thing, multiplied across a pilot corps, consumed across 6 days and then the month that followed, is what Big Week destroyed. 70 sorties. That is where 4 years of dominance ends. Not in the burning factories. The factories came back, in the men who could not.